Welcome to the Angry Ewok channel. Today we'll be discussing what I call bracketing. It's a technique that fleets with low numbers of squadrons use to try to slow up and hinder heavy bomber fleets. And so we're going to come up with some examples here and go through those, and then we'll discuss some in-game examples of this, some of my recent vassal games. Fleets that use bracketing are typically fleets that have a lot of ships and not a lot of squadrons, and they're not trying to win an air war, they're trying to lose it in such a way that their ships have time to deliver the damage that they need to win the game. And we'll go over a quick example of what bracketing looks like. So you'll see here I have 3 A-wings that are clustered around a rock facing off against some Imperial squadrons, and you'll see Dengar is in the very middle. The reason I put them on the rock is because you don't want your bracketing ships to get tied up with engagement, because if you do that, you typically don't have intel, and so you're not going to be able to get them loose. The squad heavy player will be able to lock down your squadrons and keep them from moving. And then here you'll see a theoretical squadron command comes in. I push 3 squadrons. These A-wings move out, and they engage this bomber ball from 3 different directions. And you'll see that Dengar is out. I'm not within distance 1 of Dengar in any direction, but I'm just outside of him right there. You don't have to be this close, but this is as close as you can be, because your whole point is to stay outside of distance 1 of Dengar, but inside of distance 1 of some of the squadrons that need intel. And then this forces a dilemma, and you'll see the overlapping engagement bubbles that these A-wings project, and then it forces a dilemma, and Dengar has to either go left or right to apply in heavy in one direction or the other, thereby leaving some of the other squadrons tied up. What you see here is an Imperial fleet that is mostly ships with Sienna Ree and Valen Rudor facing off against a theoretical rebel fleet with your typical Jan Ors, a couple X-Wings, Biggs, Darklighter to spread damage around, and a couple Y-Wings, probably Gold Squadron or Nora Wexley in there, something like that. And so the basic concept that we're wanting to try to illustrate today is that if they have one intel ship, that intel ship can only apply heavy to things that are within distance 1 of it, and she can only be in one place at one time. So sometimes you can split up a bomber wing by trying to engage both sides of it. Something like this would achieve what I'm saying. Moving Valen Rudor in to where he is outside of range of Jan, but in range of this Y-wing, Biggs, and this other Y-wing, and then sending Sienna Ree almost in a straight line away from Jan, as close to Jan as you can be without actually engaging her and doing the same thing, grabbing this X-wing, this Y-wing, and this X-wing. So what you're doing here is you're forcing Jan to make a decision. Does she want to unlock these 3 squadrons by moving here and applying heavy to Valen Rudor, thereby stranding or at least making these squadrons shoot at Sienna, which, as we all know, Sienna is hard to put away. Or does she want to do the opposite, go into Sienna and then have these fight, or just have to deal with Valen? And the concept there is, instead of getting bombed by all 6 of these bombers, you're only getting bombed by 3 of these bombers, and you're forcing 3 of these bombers to somehow deal with one of your squadrons. And so it's not going to prevent you from getting hit, but hopefully it's going to delay the attrition from the bomber wing long enough for your ships and your big hitters to get home. And so we'll talk about the setup for that. So let's say that as the 2 fleets are closing, you're approaching the turn where you know that the bomber wing is going to try to engage. Hopefully this is about the same time that your ships are going to try to engage. You don't want to be getting bombed for 2 turns before you get into range. No matter how well you fly, you're going to lose. But in the squadron phase, because you really don't want to activate your 2 squadrons early and let the enemy bomber wing see where they're going to be and then fly around them. You want to wait as long as you can, and then in the squadron phase, move them into position. So what you don't want to do is allow some of these X-wings to tie you up and thereby prevent you from doing this bracketing tactic. So you want to make sure that you're outside of their effective threat range. You can quickly figure this out by taking the squadron's speed plus their engagement range, which is going to be range 1, and making sure you stay outside of that. So for example, if you know if that's as far as that X-Wing can engage, you take Valen, move him in. You take Sienna and do a similar thing. And she really should start over here somewhere, but we want Sienna to be in a similar location here. Because we want to be able to get as far to the sides of this bomber ball as we can. Because the farther to the sides you get, the harder it is for them to unlock both ships with one intel. So this is where we want to stage ourselves before the initial engagement. So then, depending on who has first player or second player, you know, there'll be a decision, a pivotal point where these two squadrons are going to engage. And hopefully, you can be the one who pulls the trigger and pushes and tries to grab this fleet before it can hurt you. So let's say, for example, this flotilla activates. This boosted comms flotilla talks to Sienna, talks to Valen. Like we just illustrated, we want to be distance 1 plus a hair on both sides of Jan's light, of Jan. So we'll move something like, and I know that I'm triangulating here. You obviously can't do this in a live game or a tournament. However, you can kind of eyeball it and get real good at measuring here, pulling that tool away, measuring here, pulling that tool away, making the move, and stating very clearly to your opponent your intentions of being outside of engagement range of Jan, which we have achieved here. We have this Y-wing, we have Biggs, and we just barely have that Y-wing as well. So we'll do the same thing with Sienna. So we'll put our template down. We'll note, okay, well, that's about where we want to be. Put that template down. Here comes Sienna. We'll move her here and check, stating again that our intention is to be outside of engagement range of Jan Ors, knowing we have plenty of movement with this interceptor. Bang, there we go. Now, we have this X-Wing, this Y-Wing, and actually I'm short of that X-Wing, but you get the picture. So, at this point, when the Rebel bombers want to attack, they're going to hopefully have to pick to either move to the right or the left and unlock, and intel one of your squadrons, and then leave the other squadrons engaged. Either direction. So, what you do not want to do here, the most important thing that you must avoid doing is placing your squadrons in a position where Jan can be in distance 1 of both of them at the same time. And the reason for that is if I were to position my squadrons here, she could simply move to this location and intel both of those squadrons, and now all their efforts of trying to jump forward and freeze this bomber wing in place are completely wasted, because then Jan has negated their effect and they'll move in and bomb. Now, you'll probably notice pretty quickly that your best case scenario here is you're gonna stop 2 bombers from getting there. You know, the best case you're gonna do is lock up these 2 squadrons in this case. So these 4 can move forward and bomb, assuming your range and so forth. So you're really only stopping two units from bombing you and taking Jan out of position. This becomes a lot better if you have a second wing of squadrons supporting your ships. And I know that once you get once you get to 4 squadrons, actually you may want to start targeting squadrons and trying to kill things and just hurt them on the way in. But we're going to demonstrate that over here with the Imperial Fleet, just to give you an example of an Imperial bomber wing. A lot of you will recognize the Onager Quasar combination. This is a fairly typical Imperial bomber wing. We've got Merrick steel. I put some Phantoms in there just because I like Phantoms. Tempest, Mauler, Dengar here in the middle, so that's your one source of intel. It's important that you look for one source of intel. If there are two sources of intel, this bracketing tactic does not work. And you got Jindin, and in this particular case, I put Reimer. But on the other side, we have a Rebel fleet with A-wings. We have two generic A-wings. We have Shara Bay, and we have Tycho. So, the Imperials are faster than the Rebels. It's a pretty big concern. The whole pre-measuring how far that X-Wing can reach out and engage you doesn't work against them, because Merrick Steele is out front. He's the fastest. He's speed 5. There's nothing faster than him. He can get to anything he wants to. So the only real way you can negate that advantage is by just making it very, very unappealing for him to engage. And what I mean by that is, for example, if you look where Shara is. Shara, number one, nobody wants to shoot Shara. If you're shooting Shara, she's winning. But in this case, I have Shara Bay out front. You know, she's projecting an engagement bubble to protect this flotilla, which is typically going to be my Bright Hope flotilla if I'm flying this correctly. And then I got Tycho over here. Now, these two squadrons are aces, and I like them out front. The reason I like them is because Shara can counter. Tycho can leave engagement if he wants to, so you can't lock him up. So there's no way that the Imperials can send one squadron out here, tie him up, and freeze him in place. He can still get back and be relevant to this bracketing tactic from over here. Outside of that, I really don't want anything else in striking distance, especially of Merrick Steele. So I keep my others, my generics, my A-wings, back outside of the first strike distance. You'll see that, you know, speed 5 plus distance 1 is going to be short. It might get this A-wing, it's going to be short of this A-wing, but even if they do that, if they send themselves down in here, you're wanting to, again, make it so unappealing that they don't want to do it. So anybody coming in here is probably going to take a flak from this flotilla, a counter from the A-wing at a minimum. Anything else is bonus, but you're going to get at least 3 shots on something. A lot of times that first strike is going to come from Merrick Steele or some kind of fast-moving, like maybe Sienna Ree or Mauler Mythil. So small 1-point chip damage is important. Even against a scatter ace, those start to add up. So in this scenario, let's redo our bracketing maneuver. So Dengar's here in the middle. Let's say that this flotilla activates. When it activates, I'm gonna grab Shara, I'm gonna grab Tycho, and I'm gonna move them in. And they're gonna move in. So there's my speed 5 comes to about right here. I wanna grab these 3 squadrons if I can. I can do that from here with no problem and stay well outside of Dengar. So I'm gonna do that. So I'm gonna move in. I'm not gonna move in all the way. I'm gonna move in about right here. And sure enough, I've got Steel, I've got this Phantom, and I've got Whisper. Now I know you're sitting at home saying, wait, that's a grit squadron. We'll get to that later. Just go with the example. So, we got Shara Bay. Shara Bay is gonna do the same thing. She's gonna move again to try to get outside of Dengar, but try to clip as many of the enemy squadrons as possible. So, she'll do something like this. And so now we're getting Tempest, we're getting Mauler. We came up a little short of Reimer, and that was a mistake on my part. Just, you know, playing this takes a lot of finesse. This is not a magic bullet. But, so now what we've done is we've bracketed these 3, and we bracketed these 2. So when the Imperial squadrons want to engage, Dengar has to make a decision. And so he wants to either go onto Shara or Tycho, here or here, to unlock some of his squadrons. But there's no way that he's getting all of these out of here without activating, overwhelming one of these 2 aces with firepower, killing it, and then moving Dengar to unlock the other one. That's the only way he gets out of this. And if you do that, they're spinning their shots, shooting your air wing, which is exactly what you want. Don't think that you're going to win an air war. You're trying to lose an air war gracefully. You're not trying to win it. So just expect them to overwhelm one or the other and then use their intel to free up the rest. Now, the reason I like to have a couple more A-wings in my back pocket is that, let's say that at some point this assault frigate has to activate and it goes here. Well, now with my bracket set up, I am very concerned even still of the squadrons that get loose getting onto my assault frigate. And I don't want that. I want to limit the number of turns that this Imperial Fleet can bomb my assault frigate. These two A-wings are very, very beneficial for that. Once I've established the position of my assault frigate, my next activation will be this flotilla. The reason for that is I'll grab these two A-wings and push them here. So for example, if they move here and here, now we've got the Imperials in a conundrum. Because we have these two squadrons locked with Shara. We have these three squadrons locked with Tycho. I know steel can get loose. I get that. We'll get to grit in a minute once again. But if the intel chooses to go one way or the other, it can't be here. So what that does is that ensures that this assault frigate will not get bombed this turn. Short of a couple parting shots after you've killed one of these two aces, intel the other one, and then blasted through one of these A-wings. And that's an awful lot of damage. Some Imperial Squadron wings can do it, but what you've done is you have forced this Imperial Squadron wing to fight your squadrons instead of bombing your ships. And that's all you're really going for. If you're flying a mostly ship-heavy fleet, you should expect to lose an air war, but you're trying to bank on the fact that your ships can beat their ships and beat them fast enough that you can win. So, my suggestion is, make sure they have to kill as many of your squadrons as you can. Be as annoying as you possibly can for as long as you possibly can to buy yourself the time that you need to get home. These two examples I've given are very generic. They don't tailor to the enemy squadron complement that you're facing, and they don't really address grit, which are two very real problems that you'll have to deal with, and they are not particularly well suited against the classic two-ship squadron push with Squall, because the striking distance of a Squall Speed 5 ship is farther than anything else in the game. So they can grab you and lock up your bracketing ships relatively easily, making it much more important to have your squadrons on asteroids or things that block engagement so they can move off of those. But just wanted to introduce the tactic to you. It's not always the answer. Sometimes you look across the field and you see that they have Merrick Steel and a bunch of Sloan Aces, and you think, well, those Sloan Aces can do chip damage of 1 and they can take away my tokens, but they're not going to burst down my ships fast enough to kill me. It's steel that's going to be the problem. And you may just send every A-wing you have or every X-wing you have and try to kill steel, because he's the linchpin, so to speak. So sometimes this bracketing is the approach, sometimes it's not the approach, but you need to know about it so that it's another option rather than just diving headlong into an enemy bomber ball that can outshoot you and burn through your squadrons very quickly. You're banking on buying your ships time and preserving your points where you can. Be wary of enemy fleets that are not looking to engage. If you send your squadrons in and try to bracket something, they are exposed, and it's very likely that they will die. And you could run into a situation where the enemy fleet simply kills your squadrons and runs away. You will only want to commit your ships to the bracketing technique if you feel like there's going to be a decisive engagement, because there's nothing worse than getting your ships lined up and ready to fight, and then you send your squadrons in to bracket to buy yourself that time, and they get burned down and the enemy fleet runs away. That's not really a very large victory tournament points wise. It's going to be a 6-5, but that is a concern. So always gauge that in the back of your mind. If you cannot force a decisive engagement,
Don't send your bracketing ships in because you're just feeding points. And bracketing is not designed to do damage. It's designed to buy time. And so all your A-Wings won't be able to focus their fire on any one particular target. So they're not going to kill anything. And so you always have to think, all right, well, how much is my air wing worth, and can I get at least that much back by sending them in? So always keep that in the back of your mind when committing to this bracketing tactic.